Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes. Try that
Myranda,
again.
you're muted. You are just on your laptop, right?
Yeah, I'm on my laptop. Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
All right, and then I guess, yeah, someone on mute. Talk online. The room can't hear them. Then
Yeah, I'll just, if we have any questions, I'll repeat the questions in the room and same online, I suppose, so that we can
Yeah.
hear. We're trying to figure out how to do this in-person presentation. Okay, but it looks like you can see my screen and everything, so I think we're all right. All right, am I good to go or
Good,
are we waiting?
yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna watch Slack and I'll relay questions and. Yes, Myranda, thank you for
Awesome.
telling us about AI.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Myranda. I work as a senior data scientist at the Vanderbilt Data Science Institute in Nashville, Tennessee. A lot of what we focus on is data science applied to a wide range of departments. And lately we've been focusing a lot on AI. So I'm super excited to talk to you about AI assisted programming because I think it's really relevant to the Hack Week model. So you can pull this up. I know we have the Pull to Jupyter Hub if you want to follow along with me. There is going to be some interactive coding that I encourage you to do along with me. So do go ahead and have this tutorial up. But yeah. Okay, so hackathons, as we know, involve a lot of programming. Maybe you came here with a lot of programming experience, or maybe this is your first time ever looking at Python or R. And it's a really great model to learn and to bring products together in just a couple of days. But especially if you're new to programming, or even if you've been programming for a while, hackathons involve a lot of debugging. And this can suck up your time just trying to read through documentation. And mostly you find that you're working on just slapping code together and trying to get it to work. Okay, I think we've got the lighting situation figured out here. So hopefully that didn't bother anyone's brain. So this workflow though of kind of hacking and trying to figure out how to write code and then reading through all of this documentation is about to change with AI. And there's a lot of AI models out there that I'll take you through. So this is called, this new workflow is called AI assisted programming, and it allows you to spend more time planning the purpose of your code while allowing, a model to go through the very frustrating part of debugging and figuring out documentation. So we have a lot of workshops about this at Vanderbilt University, and I did link if you want to read about this one professor's experience. Oops, I didn't mean to click on it, but there you go. And so basically what this success story was we held a workshop on AI assisted programming and how to use transformer models at Vanderbilt, and this professor who had never used AI before in her life, she'd never done machine learning, was able to put together hours after the workshop a complete classification model of birdsong. So this was something she wanted to do for years. She wanted to take in recordings of birdsong and then be able to classify like what was a bird and then what was just ambient noise or some other sound. And just a little bit after taking this workshop, she was able to put that together, which is pretty incredible and really sets a new pace for programming that has never before really been seen. So first of all, we've got to talk about, what are these models? You've heard of ChatGPT, probably. You've heard of like the GPT models. But it's really vital to know what these models are and what they can and can't do before you just jump in and try to get results from them. So the key term here is generative AI. So you may have heard this term before. They're the kind of LLMs that we're talking about when we're saying AI assisted coding. The generative is that G in GPT. And this just means that this model is trained to generate text. So it is just making a calculation to generate the next most probable word or token is the correct term here. But you can think of it as predicting the most probable word. So it's going to have, construct a sentence, and after each word, it is looking down and saying, what's the most probable word that a person would probably say after this one? So this should tell you a couple of things. It should tell you that the number one purpose of this model is to generate text. It's not to fact check. It's not to look up answers or have any sort of correct, it's to form sentences. So when you're asking it for facts, not really what they're made for, but when you're asking it to generate structured code, it's really good at that because code tends to follow a pattern that it can easily replicate. We don't know exactly what all of these models were trained on, especially the closed or paid ones like ChatGPT. But a lot of models like this, they're called transformers. If you're familiar with the Hugging Face interface, a lot of open source transformers are on there. And a lot of these generative models were trained on free, publicly available text data, which was widely the internet, which was widely Wikipedia. So you can imagine that there's some biases that are incorporated into that as well. So just to get that out of the way so that you know what to expect when you're working with these models. So there's several tools. Today, I will be using just one tool, but I really encourage you to explore all of these and kind of choose the ones that you prefer to work with. If you want to follow along with me exactly, I will be using ChatGPT. I have a paid account, but you can have a free trial. It's a pretty generous free trial, as I understand. And I'll be going through how I'm using that. So ChatGPT, I say that this is the darling of the AI world because most people know about this, even if you don't know anything about AI. You've probably heard about ChatGPT and students using it to complete their homework and how terrible it's all going to be soon. But it's actually a really useful tool when you're using it right. So there are a couple different models you can use with ChatGPT. There's GPT 3.5 and GPT-4. You'll see those options if you sign up for ChatGPT. GPT-4 is the most recent model. It offers generally better performance, and it comes with a couple of neat tools. GPT 3.5 still works great. Another thing that you might see with these models is context length. This is just how much text you can send to this model for it to process. So you can send, an entire document that will take up your context length. And that's typically what you're charged by, the request to the model and then how much information you're sending it. So GPT 3.5, you can send more information to the model, but it tends to be less accurate or less useful. GPT-4, you can send less information, but it tends to perform better. So I usually use GPT-4 because I'm just asking for code. I'm usually not sending it an entire book, which you probably could do. So I have some quick facts about all of these tools. So basically GPT-4, GPT-3, it costs money, usually like cents per request. So it's not too prohibitive unless you're using it all the time. But it stopped training in September 2021. So these models are trained. And then when they're live, these are trained models. So any event or package or coding news that happened past September 2021, it's not going to know about. So if you have this brand new package that was produced last year, you can't ask GPT-4 about it unless you give it some more information, which we'll talk about later. So no updated knowledge past September 2021. But it does have a nice suite of coding specific tools. I'll be using Code Interpreter, which is actually pretty wild. GPT-4 can now run its own code, which is a little scary, but it's able to generate code, then run that code on its own server, and then read the error messages and then say, oh, I'm so sorry, there was an error in my code. I will run it again. And so it's able to iterate itself, which is super weird to watch, especially because it apologizes to itself when it has an error. It's so polite. It's so polite. So that's what I'll be using. So you'll be seeing me do that. But I encourage you to use some of these other tools if you want, especially so Bing GPT. This is by Microsoft, and it is making Microsoft Edge and Bing come back to life. I never thought I would be giving a lecture on actually using the Edge browser, but you have to use the Edge browser to access Bing GPT. So get that back from your recycle bin, and you can log in with a free Microsoft account and then access Bing GPT from the Edge browser. This one is a little different. How is it different? Well, it's still a GPT model, but it's not the same like Chat GPT model. So it still works pretty well. I don't use it as much, but it is free to use as long as you have Edge. And one difference is that it's able to access the web for answers. So it is actually able to, I guess, query Bing and get web results back as answers. So what this means for you is that whereas ChatGPT is kind of limited on everything before 2021, Bing is able to access the web. So if it doesn't know an answer, it can look it up on the web, find that answer for you, and then give it to you. So another option for you there. Another great one that is relatively new is Hugging Chat. If you're familiar, I talked about Hugging Face. That is a very popular website for transformer models, for neural network models as well. So they developed a free open source chatbot, kind of in response to all of these paywalls that are going on. So this is open source. It uses the Llama 2 model, which just released like several weeks ago. It's supposed to be really good. I haven't experimented around with it very much. And it's also able to search the web. So I will definitely be checking out Hugging Chat since it's open source. I think that's really neat, and I love to support open source projects. Llama 2 model is supposed to be really nice, but it's not as widely used for coding just because it hasn't been around reliably as long. And of course, those are just the three main ones that I deal with or that I see the most, but there's other notable tools. GitHub Copilot, super useful. You can sign up for this with your GitHub account. If you are a student or you have a school email that makes you look like a student, it is free. So I think a lot of us probably have those types of emails. It is free, and you can have a plugin for VS Code. It is wild because it will actually read the code that you are typing and then give you suggestions. So my husband uses GitHub Copilot, and he says that he'll be, especially if he's doing like tests or something and he has different cases, like, case, test this, case, test this. He'll type out the first case and then it will know the next cases he wants to test. Crazy. So that's pretty cool if you want it to read your whole code. I think they're going to be putting out more tools as part of GitHub Copilot X, which I think the X just stands for other tools that we think are cool. And so one of those is to be able to read in like an entire file structure of your code and then give you suggestions based on that instead of just one function or one file. So this one, pretty useful with if you're using VS Code. Google Bard, available through Google. I haven't messed around with that too much recently. And then Poe, which is a website that hosts multiple chat models. I think you can query them a certain amount of times per day for free. And then they have like a paid version. The cool thing about Poe is you're also able to create your own custom chatbots by choosing the model that you want. So like GPT-3, GPT-4, or even some other model that you know of. You can choose the model and then give it like a prompt and tell it how it should respond to things. And then you have like your custom chatbot, you can share that with people. So I think the example one is like a pirate chatbot where it responds to your question like a pirate would. So if you want that, go there. We're not going to be using a pirate model today or making one. But yeah, so just a lot of different tools. Like I said, I'll be using ChatGPT in my demo, but I really encourage you to look and find the one that works best for you. So the next part of working with these models is prompt engineering. This is a new term that's starting to be widely used by AI users because they are only as useful as you make them. So it's kind of like if you were talking to someone and you ask them a very vague question with no context about what you mean, they're not going to know how to answer you. So if I just walked up to a person on the street and I said, hey, how do I write a Python program? They're going to say, I don't know. So while these models are really useful, you really have to, we call it engineering your prompt. You need to make sure that you are asking the question you mean to ask, and that it knows what, you understand what the model can and cannot do, how it can help you. So there are several different strategies. I've highlighted 3 here, but actually my supervisor at Vanderbilt has written a very nice paper. He's a co-author on it, on all of the different types of prompt engineering that you can do. So 3 of them: persona, probably the one that I use the most. This is where you tell the model to act like something. In this case, a programmer, a scientist, a teacher. And then it will start responding like that persona. The reason it can do this is because, as I said, a lot of its training data was like internet. So you can imagine forums, you can imagine blog posts. It has kind of internalized a lot of these personas. So if you ask it a question and it doesn't give you a very good answer, you can say, okay, answer this question like you're a programmer. What do I need to do to write this kind of Python code? Or answer this question like you're a teacher or some sort of profession, and it's pretty good at it. Although sometimes if you ask it to answer like it's a doctor, it will tell you, I am not a doctor. Don't follow medical advice from AI. But it's pretty good to get some coding answers that you want. Another really powerful one is giving it examples. So if I say I want to write code that outputs in JSON, this is how I want the JSON to be structured. I want it to look like this. Even though these models aren't trained to give you JSON, sometimes they will resist you and say, I don't know what JSON is. If you give it an example of what it looks like, it's pretty good at generating that. And it says, oh, okay, so you just want it structured like this. You want curly brackets, you want all of these things. So giving an example of what you want. And then the third one that I have here is called flipped interaction. This is really good for when you want to build something and you don't know how at all. So you say, I want to build, a cloud deployed app. Ask me questions until you have enough information to build this. And so the model will then go, okay, what do you want your app to do? How much are you willing to spend on this app? Does it need a database attached to it? And it will go through and ask you questions, and then it'll say, okay, I now have enough information to tell you how to go on to Amazon and get AWS and deploy this cloud app. It's actually really cool. I did this for making a Jupyter notebook extension. And I've never done that before. And I said, ask me questions until you know how to make an extension in Jupyter Notebook doing this thing that I want you to do. And it was like, okay. And so I did that. So if you want more prompt engineering, I highly recommend looking in this paper. It gives a really good overview of all the different strategies. I mostly use the persona one or the examples one, but all of them are pretty interesting to see. So combining all of this leads us to this AI-assisted workflow. This is kind of what we're proposing as this new workflow for coding that hopefully saves you time and frustration. So first, prompt engineer your questions. Specifically for coding is what we'll be talking about today. Really think about and iterate on your prompt. If you're not getting the answer that you want, give feedback. Tell it, no, that's not what I want. I actually want something more like this. If it's about a package in Python that the AI model does not know about, especially with GPT-4, it's really good at, you can upload attachments. You can upload, a documentation of this package. So if it's a new package, it doesn't know about it and it says, sorry, I can't write code with this, go to the website, get some information about the package, give it to GPT-4. It does a lot better. And then finally, run the code, and hopefully it works the first time. But as we all know, code rarely works the first time. And so you will send those errors to the model. If you're using Code Interpreter, it will automatically run the code that it gives you and then feed the errors back to itself. But if you're not using Code Interpreter, then you should run the code. And then if you get an error, you can literally just copy and paste the error code and say, with the code that you gave me, I received this error. And it'll say, oh, I am so sorry. Here is how you can fix it. Please let me know if this works. I promise it's so polite. It's makes me uncomfortable how polite it is. And then I have rinse and repeat. That's supposed to be indented. Oh, well, rinse and repeat. So, go through running the code, send errors to the model, iterate on this process. And then finally, use that working code that you have and move on to the next part of your project. So hopefully this will help you in your hack week as you are trying to hack away at something that you've never done before. So I say now you can get more work done faster and without cursing over package documentation, as I know happens in these kinds of events. So very, very quick overview. So I can pause here for questions before we do our demo, if there are any. I haven't been looking at the tutorial Slack, but I'm also going to drink some water.
We don't have any questions just yet. Other than this is going to be posted somewhere where people can get the links.
The video or?
No, the slides, the notebook.
So this notebook, so someone was asking where they can get the notebook. The notebook is available on the OHW tutorials GitHub. and also in the Jupyter lab. So
Thank
if
you.
you go to the tutorial Slack, Alex put up a very nice link right here where you can open the tutorials in our Jupyter Hub. So yes, I do encourage you to be following along in the notebook because we're about to do some coding. Okay, yes.
So I just want to know that this it works fine because I'm on paid version. I just wanted to see if
Yeah. So the question for those online is ChatGPT worth subscribing to? In my opinion, yes. Of course, I am a little biased because my work pays for it. I think the subscription I have is $20 a month, but my husband's work doesn't pay for it and he has it. So he says it's very much worth it to just pay for it and get it, especially I'll show you Code Interpreter, super, super cool if you're going to use it for coding. So I would say yes, if you can afford the $20 a month, it's worth it. But you can do the free trial for however many requests it lets you do. And it's a pretty good free trial. So you could try it out and then, but yeah, I say yes.
Is it 20 and then you get a limited request, or it's about 20? Like,
So the question was, is it how many requests do you get with the subscription? Depends on the model. 3.5 you can do a lot with it. And then I think 4 is a certain amount. I would have to look. It always reminds me like how many I've used. Cap of 50 messages every 3 hours for GPT-4. So I haven't hit that cap, I don't think. But sometimes if you're iterating on code, you can go and like try it a bunch. So I usually try to like get my prompt just right before I send it so that I don't hit that cap. Yeah, great questions. OpenAI should pay me at this point. Okay, so let's jump into this demo. So I'll take you through a live coding session with ChatGPT 4 code interpreter thing. I'll show you how to do that if you have the subscription to it or the free trial. You're welcome to try this on your LLM of choice. Just please note that our answers will probably be different. So when I'm going to tell you the exact prompt that I'll be using. But even if you send that prompt, because it's a generative model, it's supposed to generate new text every time. Your answer might be a little different. So don't be frustrated if you get different code. Try out that code and see if it works. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You can try again. If we get wildly off the rails, because this is a live demo, I did do this beforehand and then take screenshots of everything that I put in and that it gave me. And so that's at the very bottom of this notebook. If you get lost or you just want to see exactly how I did it before, if for some reason this goes different. So in the case of technical difficulties, we can look at the screenshots at the bottom of the notebook. All right, let's get started. So first, for our demo, we need to establish a project goal that we're going to demo. You know, what do I want to do? And actually, I asked ChatGPT what I should demonstrate. So I said, I am demonstrating a potential oceanography project for students at a hackathon. The goal is to use machine learning and data visualization to demonstrate an ocean science concept, such as using Argo floats or NOAA oceans data, come up with the data and project goal that I should present. So if for some reason you're not attached to a project yet, this is a great, way to get one. So that sounds like a fantastic opportunity. Thank you, ChatGPT. So it gave me 3 ideas and I just chose this first one because I liked it. So ChatGPT says that we should do predictive modeling of sea surface temperature with Argo float data. It tells me what data to use. It says Argo float data provides valuable information about the ocean's physical and biogeochemical parameters, including temperature, salinity, and pressure. The data is freely available. Project goal, develop a machine learning model that can predict sea surface temperature based on other ocean parameters like salinity, pressure, and geographical location. This sounds a lot like a project that is going on right now. Smaller scale because we're demoing. And then it even gives me like a little bonus thing if I want to, take my project to the next level. So, all right, so our project goal is to predict sea surface temperature using Argo float data. Great. So first, we need to access the data. It told us to use Argo float data. Obviously, we're not just going to blindly follow instructions from an AI. I decided that is probably a good idea to use Argo float data. But I need to access this. So let's say I don't know how to access Argo SST data. So we can see what ChatGPT will find for us. So I put my prompt here, just how do I access Argo float sea surface temperature data in Python? So now I'm going to show you how I do this. So I log on to ChatGPT. It saves your history of chats. So I don't think any of these are embarrassing, but maybe don't read too much into them. How do I print in Python? I don't think that's on there. But so this is where you can select the model. GPT-3 will look like this. I'm using GPT-4. And then from here, I don't know if it says available exclusively to Plus users. So I think that's if you pay for it. It lets you do this beta code interpreter, which is what I'm going to use just because it's super cool and I want to show it to you. But yeah, would be happy to talk about all of the other things you can do with ChatGPT. So I'm just going to paste this prompt in here. How do I access Argo float sea surface temperature in Python? Let's see what it says. All right, Argo float data provides valuable insights into the ocean's temperature and blah, blah, blah. Accessing this data can be done through various online repositories. Okay, it gives me. Interesting. So this is slightly different than the screenshots that they asked us. It told me to use ArgoPy. Now it's saying to use requests, Xarray, and CDF. Oh, it's giving me a whole workflow. Okay. Yeah.
Do you ever intentionally put the same prompt in twice in a row just to see the variability?
Yeah, so the question was, do I ever intentionally put the same prompt in there twice to see the variability? I do, especially when it's something like this, like it's using the requests library and it's saying, put in the URL. Well, I want like the actual, give me the actual URL for some data that I can use. And so I may put in this prompt again. So if I do that, let's see how it's different. And it says, okay, let's go through a more detailed example. Yes. Yeah.
There's something wrong with what you're giving me, or can you tell me how to read it?
Yeah. So someone was saying that they you can also say, oh, I can't do it this way. Can you tell me another way of doing it? And it will do that for you. So it's taking us through this whole pipeline. So I specifically wanted to use the library ArgoPy that I already know exists. And it if you want, you can see the screenshots at the bottom. So I'm going to kind of adjust this a bit so we can get a specific data file. So I'm going to say, how do I access Argo float sea surface temperature in Python? I want to use the library ArgoPy and access a specific Argo float for my analysis. Please provide the link. Oops. The link to that data in your answer or the request. So I'm just going to alter this prompt a bit to see if I can get it to give me a specific data set, because it did the first time I did this. Certainly, the ArgoPy library is specifically designed to access Argo float data. Thank you. Okay. It said, oh yeah, that exists. So now it's telling me how to, pip install ArgoPy. We already have ArgoPy on the Jupyter Hub if you're using it. And so now it's actually giving me, an ID of the data I can get, how to use the Argo data fetcher to get that ID, converting it to Xarray, which is very nice, and then getting the sea surface temperature. So this is more like what I wanted. Also gives me additional notes and the link to the ArgoPy documentation, which is very nice of it. Okay, thank you. It's still generating. All right, it's done. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to copy this code. It has a little nice clipboard where you can directly copy. So let's see. Let's copy that from ArgoPy import data fetcher and Argo data fetcher. If I run this, and it loaded apparently. Okay. Add a new cell. There we go. So let's get this other part. Data equals Argo loader to Xarray. See if that works. Yep. All right. And now let's get the sea surface temperature data. So I am very interested as we're going along, if you get different answers or, some other method that it gives you, really interested to know what your results are here. And now it says you can now analyze and visualize the sea surface temperature data using libraries like Pandas, Matplotlib, or Seaborn. All right, so let's see how we can visualize this. So we've got our data. This is what ChatGPT told us to do. It gave us an ID. I don't know what this ID is. If you want to see the specific one that I use, like I said, the screenshots are at the very bottom of this. But let's see how we can plot this data on a map, maybe. So I'm just going to take this. How can I plot this data on a map? And it does remember what you put in previously, as long as, it has some limit because it has a lot of, a limit to the context length it can take in. But it generally does remember what we're talking about. All right, so it says we can use Matplotlib and Car2Py. Car2Py says here's a step-by-step guide. All right, we're going to import some libraries. I'm gonna go, it's moving, so it's hard to, all right. Import some libraries, extract the relevant data. So it knows exactly how to get the variables that we want to plot, which I think is super cool. And then it even sets up this map for us. So this is pretty similar to my run of the demo before this. And now it's going to plot that for us, tell us how we can customize the plot, and then how we can even display the plot. Okay, and then it gives us some very nice notes. So now if I go back to our notebook here on visualizing it, let's put in those libraries. Let's get this extracting the variables. And setting up our map. Map. So it hasn't added our data to it yet, but that was cool. All right. So now it's going to actually plot the data on that map. Add another, I'm just going to add a bunch more code cells. Okay. Oh, error. Oh, okay. Let's see how we can do an error. All right. Whoa. Whoa. It really didn't like that. Usually it's good about catching these. Axes should be an instance of geoaxes.class.matplotlib. All right, so I'm just going to copy and paste this and give it to ChatGPT. Okay, so now I'm going to say, okay, when I try to plot the data, I'm going to say from step 5 so that it knows what I'm talking about. I get this error, and now I'm just going to paste that right in. Okay, it says, so we can fix this by doing this. It says, here's an updated version of the code that should work. Okay, set up the map, plot the data. So I think the map should be set up the same, but I'm just going to still copy that. The key change here is to explicitly create the geoaxes object with the projection. So it kind of explains why that error happened if you're interested in reading through that. And then it says also make sure that your data variables are in the correct shape. Okay, so now I'm going to go all the way back up to wherever that started. Okay, so I think it was this that I'm replacing. So this is the new map that we're going to make. Okay, looks the same. And then try this for plotting the data. See if that helps us. So a lot of times if you're using code and it's not wanting to cooperate today. Usually, am I on code interpreter? Yeah, I am. Maybe it's just not feeling good today, but usually it will run that code and then catch the errors itself. Explicitly create the geoaxes object with a projection argument in plot.axes. I don't see it implementing what it is saying it's implementing. Does anyone else?
Can you change plt.scatter to x.scatter?
Where? X.scatter. Oh, right here?
Yep.
Sorry.
No, at the top, you have plt.scatter, right? can you change that to x.scatter? Just so you're sure that you're using the geo axis.
Plot dot axis x.
On two,
X dot
plot the
scatter.
data.
Sure. Make it
Yes.
x.
Yes, right there.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's gonna fix it.
I did not fix it.
Well, you're on a separate figure. The code should be at the top, right? Together with the other code. I copy those two lines and put it on the cell above.
Oh, okay. So I was putting it into different cells. Ah, sure enough. Okay, so so something that ChatGPT did not realize I was doing was putting these into different cells. Sorry, was that what you were doing?
Yeah.
Okay, we had someone was telling me that in a room too. Okay, so sometimes you can still use your friends instead of robots. Thank you for that. Interesting. So I haven't had that pop up before. Okay. Oh, and I need to put that there too. Okay, so this all needs to be in the same cell. And there we go. So we get that. When I ran this the first time, I can get rid of that. It was really zoomed in. So it's interesting to see how it can come up with different answers sometimes. So I keep referencing those screenshots, but it is pretty interesting to see how we're getting. And if you yourself are getting different code and different results, I'm really interested to know that. So this is kind of zoomed in. Something we could do is say, this plot is really zoomed in. Or zoomed out, how can I zoom in? So oops, I said that the wrong way. So if and I even made a typo and it still knew what I was saying. So if I said, this plot is kind of zoomed out, how can I zoom in? And so it's going to tell me how I can, define that range of the map as well, if you want to make that look a bit better. So here it goes, creating its code. Okay, and then it kind of explains what it's doing there. But for time, I'm going to just take that code and oh, that's all right, ChatGPT. It's not what we wanted. Okay, so you can iterate on this, if you want to. I'm just going to move on ahead since I do have a couple other things I want to show you. Okay, so another common visualization with sea surface temperature is this SST versus salinity. So let's see, ask ChatGPT how we could plot that. So how could I use this data to plot SST versus salinity? Sure, you can create a scatter plot to visualize the relationship. Here's a step-by-step guide to do that. So it's extracting that data for us. It knew, I think it's interesting that it knew that, PSAL was the salinity that we wanted, and even gives us a comment. Sorry, it's moving, so it's kind of hard to see, but it is even giving us a comment. This is PSAL is a common name for salinity, but it might differ. So it's saying, this is probably the thing that you want. So I'm just going to copy that code. I'm going to try to keep everything in one cell. Okay, so we've got that. And we've got this other scatter plot code here. And now if I run that, we get a very nice sea surface temperature versus salinity. That is looking kind of weird towards the end. Okay, awesome. So we've got two plots now. We've got like a map. We've got sea surface temperature versus salinity. So now why don't we try to reach the actual goal of our project here, which is predicting SST using variables such as pressure, salinity, and longitude and latitude. So here is the prompt that I'm going to be using. I want to use a machine learning model to predict sea surface temperature using other variables. How can we generate this Python code? So now, is that in there? Okay, it says you can use libraries like scikit-learn to train and test the model. Here's a step-by-step guide to doing that. Tells us how to install scikit-learn if we need to do that. It's getting our data for us and then creating those NumPy arrays, pre-processing the data, removing NA values. That's very forward thinking of it. Splitting into test and train, and then actually training the model. So like this is super neat. And I think maybe I have exceeded my code interpreter use lately, but usually it will actually run the code that it's giving you, and you can view the code as it's running and see the results from it. So I wonder if maybe they updated it or something, or it's just because it knows that I'm presenting live. Okay, so let's get that. All right, we got NumPy. I met someone that says numpy. That makes me uncomfortable. If you say numpy, that makes me very uncomfortable. Okay, train the model. Oh, so it's giving us a random forest regressor. Okay. So when I ran this in the before, it gave me a linear regression. And let's see if this one works too. So it shows us, exactly how to fit and train and print out even, our MSE, and then even go a step further and actually make predictions. So it looks like it, gets some new data for us and makes those predictions. So I'll go over what all this code did. Oh, nope. Pressure value not defined. Where is it? Oh, it kind of changed its mind about these up here. Interesting. Is that right? So I can kind of see that it changed the variable names halfway through, which is interesting choice. I forgot how to do that. Oh, lawn is not defined. Oh, longitude. We're gonna spell today. Okay, so that was okay. Found array with an expected less than 2. Okay, we'll workshop this. We'll workshop that. For now, let's look at what it did. So it actually got out all of those values for us, turned those into arrays that we can process. We took out some NA values, split our data into training and test data, even gave us, some parameters on that. Then it got a random forest regressor, and then even showed us how to predict on our model and then get the mean squared error. So looking pretty good. If you're new to machine learning and you say, I don't know what MSE is, ask it. Say, how do I interpret this? And it is pretty good at giving you an explanation and then also giving you some other resources that you can use as well. So trying to be mindful of the time. I'm not going to try to workshop this too much. You can try if you would like. But try, maybe extend this example if you're interested in trying something like this out. We could ask it, I want to use a more complex model. I want to improve my model performance, or maybe I want to add in more data. And then I encourage you to, try this out if you want and put your findings down below, maybe share them with me or with all of us here. And then I even have a little section for a playground. So if you are, stuck in your project or you just want more information, it's a really, really cool way to play around with projects and see how far you can go. So I really think that this workflow is going to revolutionize the way that people learn to code. As a teacher at Vanderbilt, we are completely reworking how we are teaching coding in our data science program, because what is the point of giving coding assignments if all of the students can just put them into ChatGPT? And instead of trying to tell everyone not to use it, we are really trying to use a more software engineering first principle where we want them to think about how to develop the program that they want, maybe come up with test cases, and if they're going to use this tool, to use it right. So I think this will really help, people who are beginners at coding do more interesting things and do some science. So if you're interested, this is my workflow from the first time. So it actually gave me like a region to define and stuff. It's pretty interesting, but I think we're running out of time. So would love to hear your questions, or if any of you had different experiences during this demo. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed it. All right. Okay, I see a
No.
question in the room.
Okay, Awesome, super interesting. I am a fan. I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on using this tool like from the science. I know you're on the data science and programming side of things, but like thinking about using it for scientific analysis. I just had an experience last week, leading into this week, with somebody who converted a script that I have in MATLAB into Python using ChatGPT so that she could run it on her data. And the results of bad, so she knows like what's up. And so I said, well, can you compare the output from your Python file? Like, no, she doesn't have MATLAB, she doesn't have access to it. So I ran her data through my MATLAB code, and the results were different. And so since it's my algorithm, like from the science side, she doesn't know what each line is doing. It has different models and stats, right, within it. So now we're kind of at this thing where she wants to use it. I don't have time to go line by line and compare them. Like what, I don't know, just thinking about like the fact that you can get a code written in ChatGPT that runs, and how do you advise, or like just your thoughts really? I know there's no one answer, but like being able to understand from a science perspective, like the risks and benefits to that. Because I think it's obviously has huge potential, but like this could happen a lot, right?
Yeah.
Where codes are running, but the fact that a code's running doesn't mean that it's doing what you think it's doing. And
Yeah, so so the question for those who are listening online was giving an example of someone who maybe doesn't know how to code, was converting code from MATLAB to Python, and the Python code that was outputted was technically wrong, although it did run. So, you know, how do we balance risks like that, especially with, you know, people who are maybe new at coding but wanting to apply it to science? Is that correct?
yeah, I think really the problem is actually
Yeah. So it is. Yeah, so it's way better at Python than it is with other languages. I think there actually was a paper that came out this year that noted its performance with Python actually has gone down in the past few months, but its performance with other languages is just almost nothing. So it's not really trained on other languages like MATLAB. I think part of that reason is because Python is more readily available like online. It's very much, you know, an open source. A lot of people like to use it. But one thing about that is even if you are, you know, converting code and maybe you don't know code or someone else doesn't know, you know, what each line does, you can actually pull out a line and say, what does this line do? Or explain that code to me. So if you notice, it's actually like it commented its code, which is pretty neat. And so you can actually pull out a line and say, like, I don't understand what this is doing. So if I take this and say, you know, this is a line from your code, can you please explain to me what this code is doing? And then I just give it that. So really like an iterative process of, if you don't understand the code, you know, asking what does this part do? What does this part do? And maybe even saying, I want the output to be more like this. So now it's going through and it's telling me, you know, what each part of this is doing. So it says this is used to filter out rows from the feature matrix and the target array where NaN, not a number, values are present. So now it breaks down each part of the code, tells me what it's doing, and then gives me a nice little summary. So it is pretty good at that iterative process. But yeah, it's definitely not something that I recommend doing blindly. If you don't understand what your code is doing, that's not good. And anytime, sometimes we do write code where we don't understand what it's doing, but using this iterative process to try to understand it, I think is also a good tool.
the advice as a teacher,
Yeah,
if they get a code converted to Python, it runs, then like as an assignment, go through, and if you don't understand the, you know, as an educator, like what each thing is doing, then iterate and ask. And so-
yeah, exactly. So like if it, for the people online, we were saying, if you generate some code, you know, this is great assignment as a teacher to tell your students, you know, if you generate this code, but make sure you know what each line does and ask about it. Do any Does anyone else have any questions? Also want to be mindful of the online people that may have been putting questions in there.
We don't, but Miranda, this has been, I put a question up and that was about attribution, and I'm wondering, how have you seen people attribute their AI assisted programming? What does that look like?
Yeah, so attribution for AI assisted programming, are you citing it? I think it's recommended to cite ChatGPT or whatever model you're using. But it's so new, it's such a new workflow that I don't know of a requirement outside of ChatGPT asking people to cite them in their code, or if you use code, putting like maybe a comment that says generated with this model or in partnership with this model. So that's what I've seen. I've seen citations and papers that have code in them, or comments. But I think it's so new that, we're kind of all still figuring it out. But that's a great point. I think we had a question in the room. Yeah.
I guess, can you go into the probability of the responses that you give it the same prompt, it gives you something different? I've heard it described as
Yeah.
heat variable or whatever.
Yeah. So the question was, what is the variability of these responses? And probability of a certain response over another one. So each model has a parameter called temperature, which is 0 temperature is 0 variability. It theoretically should put out the exact same thing each time. And a temperature value of 1 is completely not random, but a little less consistent. And so a lot of models, so I think Bing lets you put it into like creative mode or logical mode, something like that. And that's just basically saying, do you value the same answer over and over, or do you value more creativity and variability in your answers? I'm not aware of a way to adjust this for this specific like ChatGPT website. If you're using an API to access these models, because they do have an API, you can set that temperature value. But yeah, so I think it has like a default value that I don't remember. I want to throw out 0.9, but that could be just for the API default value. But yeah, so technically, if your temperature setting is set to 0, you're going to get the same thing over and over. I don't know that this is like empirically true that actually does happen every time. But if you're doing something like writing a story, asking ChatGPT to write a story, or a poem or something, setting it to like a high variability is typically valued. But yeah, on Poe, when you create your bots, you can like set a little slider bar, I think. Yeah, there's a lot. Did that actually answer your question though?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
There don't seem to be any online. I don't know about in the room. You'd have to call that one.
Yeah.
Okay. That was terrific.
Yay.
Really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to exploring how to use that. I'm mostly in the R world, so I'm very curious about what kind of output it generates for that.
Yeah, it is not as good. So they were saying that looking into generating R, and it could be interesting to see. It's not as good as generating R code. It used to, but I've heard from some R users that they had an update where it no longer makes R code, but I do know it is able to convert R to Python pretty easily. So, but yeah, if you are trying this out this week, definitely put in the Slack like screenshots. I'm really interested to see how it comes into play for your projects. And yes, another question.
I was just going to add on the R thing, and I was using it to help me with R code,
Uh-huh.
and I kept getting an error, and I couldn't solve the problem. And the colleague I was working with asked Ben, and Ben solved the problem for me.
Oh, okay. So Kath said that she ran into an R error, and Ben solved it for her. So,
Oh,
so if ChatGPT doesn't work, ask Ben.
okay. Well, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Awesome.
We'll be posting this recording later today on our YouTube channel, and now we'll be turning to a 15-minute break. We'll reconvene at must be 9:30 in Seattle. Is that right?
Yes.
It would be 9:30.
30?
Yeah.
10:30.
And just so you know, Miranda, there is some discussion about the attribution and some curious stuff that Felipe has run into where, but anyway, I hope you get to read it on the Slack channel.
Yeah, I'll
for the
be checking.
tutorials. Yeah. So, and anybody else has questions for Myranda later? I think you're probably going to be watching that discussion. So thank
Yes.
you.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll break.